Welcome back to True Podcast with Marvalee. I am your host, Marvalee Mills. Today we're going to be focusing on a sensitive but very important topic: women and children fleeing domestic violence and residing in shelters. On April the 1st, 1973, 11 women opened Interville House in Toronto, Canada. It was the first ever women's shelter in the country, established to help women living with domestic violence. They called it Interval House because of the necessary process between leaving the abusive relationship and the time they needed at the shelter to get their lives together, then stepping out into the world to begin the next chapter of their lives. The very first individual to have ever entered a women's shelter in Canada was a 17-year-old young woman. At the time, the shelter didn't even have beds. She slept with blankets on the floor in the living room. At that time, women were staying anywhere from one night to up to 8 months at the Interval shelter. Now, fast forward to today. Every 6 days, a woman is killed in Canada because of her intimate partner. I think that bears repeating. Every 6 days, a woman is killed in Canada at the hand of her intimate partner. I have with me in studios today Sandra McCormack. Sandra McCormack is the executive director of the Denise House, a women's shelter and support services in Oshawa. Sandra started her work with the Denise House in February of 1985, shortly after the shelter doors were open in 1984. She became the executive director in 1988, just 4 short years later. Sandra has had the unique experience of working throughout the years with much growth and progress in the violence against women sector of programs and development, in particular the Durham region. Sandra has worked with hundreds of staffs and volunteers and community partners, all committed to building a sector of services that meets the needs of women and children experiencing gender-based violence. Now, while much work has been done, there's still much more to be accomplished to continue to create a safe community for women and their children. Please help me welcome Sandra McCormack. Sandra, it is a pleasure to have you with us today. How are you?
I'm just fine, thank you. Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure to be here.
Oh, you are most welcome. It's an honor to have you speak on such an important but yet very sensitive topic that, not everybody knows about and understands and, could really explain what this is all about. So I'm glad that you are here. You have so many years under your belt in this field, and you're here to help walk us through that area. So I'm very honored to have you on our platform today.
Thank you very much.
I think the first question that I'm going to ask you, because we hear the word domestic violence, domestic abuse, and maybe not everybody can really, have an understanding of what we mean when we talk about domestic violence and domestic abuse. I wonder if you could shed some light on that so they understand what we're talking about.
Sure, absolutely. And I think, as you pointed out earlier, the original, very first shelter opened in 1973.
Yes.
So I think it's important to note that our language has changed over the years, right?
Yes,
So certainly it was originally described as domestic violence, but I think we've moved that language into what we now call gender-based violence. So really what it is, it's violence and abuse against women or women with or without children, right?
Yes.
So, and that would be violence and or abuse inflicted by their partner. We know social gatherings have changed again over the course of the years, right?
Yes.
So we just really want to be inclusive, to include all women living with partners
Yes.
within a familial environment,
Right.
experiencing any violence or abuse.
All right. Thank you so much
You're
for that for clarifying that for us. Sandra, how did Denise House come about, and do you have more than one location?
So we have one location only called the Denise House in Oshawa. When the shelter first opened, it was opened basically because some volunteers in the community saw the need. They worked very, very hard to organize the organization, get in touch with the ministry to acquire funding, did a lot of fundraising, purchased the first home. It was a very small 3-bedroom, 2-story house in a location in Oshawa. So as the shelter opened again, there was not enough space. So we very quickly moved to a different location in 1986, and then again proceeded to do another extension in 1991. But when the shelter originally opened in 1984, it was called Auberge. The name, the Denise House, came about by the very tragic circumstances of a woman, Denise Penny, being murdered by her partner. She had been at the shelter with her daughter. Her husband followed her to Alberta, and there very tragically murdered her and himself. So just left their daughter. So because Denise had been with us for a significant period of time, we then felt it was appropriate to change the name of the shelter and honor the memory of Denise. And then going forward, I think honoring all the women, as you noted, continue to be murdered by their partners across Canada.
Yes. Oh my goodness, that a very tragic story, but I am so glad that you kept her name and her memory alive through honoring her in that way. So can you tell me, Sandra, you've worked for the Denise House Women's Shelter for over 38 years. What inspired you to want to work for a women's shelter?
Well, that's an interesting question. I'm not sure when I first started I could probably answer that.
Yes.
Again, bearing in mind that shelters were very new, the concept was very new.
Yes.
The understanding that women were dealing with these circumstances was very new. I'd like to think that I was altruistic at the time. I'm not sure that I was, but I think the longer that I worked for the organization, I came to develop an understanding that this really was a very significant social issue for women, for women and children, and I felt that it was something that I could be part of and hopefully contribute to over the years. And here I still am.
Yes. Oh, God bless you for that. God really bless you for that. It takes someone with heart to want to reach out and help in that way, because I could only imagine the amount of stories that you must have heard over the years.
Well, and I think it's important. Every woman has their own unique situation, their own unique story, if you will, right? And I think what becomes inspiring for anyone working in this area is to see women succeed for themselves, what they call success, what they call advancement for themselves, not what we call it, what they call it, right? So I think that's the uplifting part of the work.
Yes. Oh, wonderful. Okay. Have you worked for another women's shelter in the past, or maybe in collaboration, or?
So originally, the Denise House, we were the only shelter in the region, and over the years, there have been 3 other shelters built and located in Durham region. So I was very fortunate to be able to work with those organizations to help support those organizations opening. So there are now 4 shelters within Durham region. And of course, we do everything that we can to work collaboratively. Yes.
Oh, wonderful. And I'm sure as the years goes on, there will be more. It's something that's very needed.
It's very needed, but as all sectors, whether it be violence against women or health or mental health services, we're all pressed for funding from our provincial government, right?
Yes, that's true. Sandra, the women that comes to your shelter, are they from a wide range of nationalities or a small range? What would you say to that?
Really, it's just every woman who reaches out. So it's there's no typical woman
Right.
whatsoever.
Right.
We see women as young as 16. We've had women, unfortunately, near their 90s years of
Oh,
age,
my.
um,
Mm.
and everything in between. All
Mhm.
I would say cultures and backgrounds come to
Right,
us.
right.
It's really about being able to reach out for the support.
Yes. And that's really good to know because, our,
Right.
audience and even myself we may not have even thought that at the age there would be such a great, distance apart.
I think what's important to note with regards to that is that um, any woman of any age is susceptible to that situation. So if we
Yes.
think of it in that regard,
Right.
it makes sense that there's no typical age.
Yes,
Right?
yes, exactly. Oh, I'm so glad that we're really unpacking this and learning so much. Um, what are the what well you just answered that question. I was going to ask you the age range that utilizes the
Mhm.
shelter. Um, on average, would you say that women who are fleeing abusive relationships are doing so with their children on average?
When there are children in the family, I would say yes.
Mhm.
But that then also there are barriers to that because
Right.
at some point there's a court process for
Yes,
custody
yes,
and access and things like
exactly.
that, right? So I would say yes. Children come with their moms,
Right.
um, but that's there's some unique challenges with
With
regards to
that.
that, right?
Okay. Okay. Now, a lot of the times when women are fleeing abusive relationship, they just get up and go quickly. They have to get up and
Yes.
go quickly. Do women ever just show up on the Denise doorsteps with their children?
From time to time, yes.
Mm.
It the location of the shelter is not confidential.
Right.
We don't
Okay.
advertise the address, but
Right.
there are ways for women to know where
No.
the shelter is.
Okay.
So probably more frequently, the police may bring women.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So
Right.
it does happen, yes.
Okay. Okay. And what are some of the reasons why women seek shelter? Because maybe not everyone know, they're probably wondering, can women seek shelter for this? Or maybe I am in this situation, can I seek shelter for this? So what are some of the reasons why a woman would want to seek shelter?
I think at some point women realize that their life with
Mhm.
their partner is really not their own. For
Right.
example, there's the kind of situation where um, I'll just give you some examples.
Mhm.
They're isolated from family or friends.
Right.
They're not able to go out of the home to work if they choose to do that.
Mhm.
Um, Something as simple as going to the grocery store is monitored, and you may only spend X number of dollars.
Mhm.
Mileage is checked on vehicles in terms of how far women go. Um, Certainly physical abuse, I
Right.
think we all are aware of,
Mhm.
but there's also the element of the psychological and emotional abuse
Right.
um,
Right.
that women experience and at some point decide that they just cannot deal with that any longer.
Okay. All right. Thank you for explaining that for us. Now, there are times that, and I know of women, there are times that women would go back and forth between the
Yes.
shelter and the abusive
Yes.
relationship before deciding to leave for good.
Yes.
What are some of the reasons why a woman would do that?
I think one of the things that we have to remember, if a woman is in a relationship,
Right.
like everyone,
Mhm.
there's love there that
Yeah.
started it, right?
That's true.
And because a woman decides that she can no longer sort of deal with the situation that she's in,
Mhm.
doesn't necessarily mean that the love has been lost.
Yes.
Right?
Yes,
It's
that's
not
true.
about that. It's about the actions of that
Right.
individual.
Yes.
And it's those actions that she's wishing
Mhm.
perhaps could change, or,
Right.
they can figure those things out. So when a woman leaves, um, it's a very, very difficult decision to make, particularly to take the children.
Exactly.
And I think there is another statistic that says women leave on average of 7 to 8 times before they make a final
Yes,
decision
yes.
in terms of leaving. So I think that we have to have that understanding that there's nothing easy about this for any of the parties.
Exactly.
And we have to understand that we need to reserve our judgment around that
Yes.
and allow a
Yes.
woman to follow her path,
Exactly.
right, to
Exactly.
safety.
And that is important because I've heard over the years many people say, well, then why would she go back? Why
Right.
would she go back? And
Yes.
there is a judgmental
Yes.
tone with that. But as you have explained, there are reasoning behind, and unless you kind of walk in the person's shoes, you won't fully understand what they're going through, what they have to
Yes.
deal with on a day-to-day basis. So I'm glad that we were able to answer that question.
That's correct.
In your years of working in the field, has there ever been a time when a woman left the safety of the shelter to return to the abusive relationship and she did not make it out alive?
Not in our experience directly with the Denise House, but there have been certainly situations across Canada with regards to that. One of the things that may be important for people to understand is when a woman decides to leave, that's really her most vulnerable time.
Yes.
Because she's upset the norm in that household.
Exactly.
And that's what can incite some behaviors or attitudes or actions at that point in time. So there's lots of demonstration and unfortunately situations where that is the period of time where women can be most hurt and also tragically murdered at that point in time. So not necessarily what if she's gone to safety and then returns in that in between period of time. Yes.
That is a very vulnerable, and speak from experience as well, that is a very vulnerable time when a woman really needs the help and support during that season of her life. What are some of the reasons why a woman would stay in an abusive relationship rather than to pick up and leave?
I think what I've learned in speaking to a number of women, they often don't realize what's happening.
Right.
In part too, because of perhaps their upbringing,
Yes.
and the circumstances of their upbringing with their family, they move on to their own family. So sometimes for them, that's what life is. That's what learned behavior, right? The other thing though too is when there's children involved and the whole emotions around taking children out of the home, taking children away from the other parent, those, because children, that's another whole issue around the emotional upheaval and roller coaster that they go through, right? Separate apart from mom. So there's lots of things for women to consider when they're leaving, once they become aware that for their own good and for their own safety.
Right, exactly.
That is something that they need to do.
Exactly. And even some women feel that maybe they can't make it because financially, maybe she was a stay-at-home mom and so on and so forth, and now she has the children. And so with that, she's taking so many things into consideration, and finance could also be one of them.
Finance is a big one. If women don't work outside of the home, for example, the option is social assistance, right? So from what they're able to access through that process, it's very challenging to find living accommodations. It's very challenging to maintain their own needs as well as children's needs, right? And then, of course, the cost of housing. And even when a woman does leave with or without her children, the process is
Yes.
very long. The process can take years
Yes.
for some
Yes.
women,
It's
right?
true. So true.
So when you think about those things,
Mhm.
yes, women are concerned about their own well-being and their
Yes.
safety, but they also recognize that it's a long process that
It's a
they're going to go
challenging,
through.
yes, and very
Yes,
challenging process.
yes.
Um, all right. Now, sometimes when a woman leaves an abusive relationship, she leaves with nothing but the clothes on her back. How does Denise House go about helping such an individual and her children? What services do you offer to her?
So we feel responsible to provide necessities. So
Yes, yes.
all clothing and personal products and
Right.
whatever is important for the family to get settled in a way that they can become comfortable. So
Yes.
we have some partnerships with other services within Durham region where clothing can certainly be provided. We're also very, very fortunate and very grateful that the Denise House is supported by the goodwill of the community, very, very much so.
Mhm.
So we have the financial capacity in some regards to be able to help with
Right.
those essentials for families.
Okay.
Certainly things like toiletries and
Mhm.
many, many of the other essentials. Again, we're very grateful for donations that
Right.
come to us. So it's great that we're able to distribute those donations to the
Yes.
families.
Right.
There's families that have particular needs. When a mom comes with a dependent young man who's a size 12 shoe,
Right.
that's not something we have on hand,
Yes,
obviously, right?
yes.
So we have the capacity to try to make sure that we can provide the essentials,
Mhm.
but essential in a way that the woman and or the kids are able to feel good about that as well,
Yes.
right?
Yes. Exactly.
Because that becomes important.
Yes. Yes.
Certainly, all of the necessities in terms of food and food requirements, diet
Right.
restrictions, anything really that the family requires,
Right.
we have a responsibility to source out.
Oh, wonderful. Good to know. Good to know because there might be women out there and they're probably wondering, they're in a similar circumstance and they're wondering, well, if I leave, then what? I have nothing,
Yeah.
right? So these are very important questions for the public to get answers to.
One of the other concerns too for women is, they do leave, they come to a service such as ours.
Right.
They're fortunate to find a new home to move to.
Mhm.
Then what? They don't have furniture, they don't have beds for the children, they don't.
Yes.
So we have partnerships with some really wonderful community groups that do a lot of work around outfitting new
Yeah.
apartments or
Oh,
new
wonderful.
living arrangements for women. So
Mhm.
that is most helpful.
That's good to know because then women are not alone from start to finish. There is
That's
help
right.
along the way, along the journey,
That's
because it is a very painful and personal time in their
Yes.
life. And it's good to know that there's someone that they can reach out to,
Yes.
that there's assistance, that there's help, there's aid. Denise House helped on average of 32% more women.
Mhm.
And I was blown away when I was researching. They helped on average 32% more women in any given year than they get annualized funding for. How are you able to do this?
Well, it's a challenge year after year.
Yes.
It's about the number of beds that are able to be offered to women in this community, right?
Right.
And
Yes.
years ago, our funding was for a certain number of beds.
Mhm.
We had many more women calling us, many women on a
Right.
wait list, if you will, and how discouraging that would be.
Yes.
We had the space to provide additional beds, and so we
Yes.
committed ourselves to doing that
Right.
and fundraising and
Mhm.
asking for the goodwill of the community to
Yes.
support us in doing that.
Mhm.
So we've been doing that since 1991.
Wow.
1991 for me.
Mhm.
And of course, we always seek the additional funding from the province, and that will never stop.
Yes.
But for as
yes.
long as we have the community support to do it, we
Mhm.
will continue to do that.
Oh, wonderful. Good to know. Now, how many women and children are able to reside at Denise House at any given time?
So the maximum number would be 27, but
Mhm.
if we've got wee ones in cribs, then
Right.
we've seen 32, 33 people in the
Okay.
house.
Well, that's come a long way because with the
Yeah.
house, when you started out, it was very, very small.
10.
10. So you've come a long way.
Well, 10 women and children
Yes.
in 3 bedrooms on the
Mhm.
second floor of a small house.
Mm-hmm.
So imagine the lack of personal space.
Exactly. Exactly.
But again, for women leaving that type of a
Right.
situation, safety is a priority.
It is a priority.
And when they're leaving, it's crisis for
Yes.
them. Right?
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
not that I think women should settle for what they don't deserve, but
Mhm.
we try to provide as best as we can
Right.
and try to provide as much personal space and
Mhm.
personal time as absolutely
Yes.
possible.
And I think what's very unique about that situation in a small space like that is the fact that they realize they're not alone. They're not going
Yes.
through this alone,
Yes.
and they meet friends that would even become long time
Yes.
life friends.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I've seen lots of friendships formed within the shelter and
Yes.
then carried on
Yes.
after the women have left.
Yes, that's very, very important. Now, in the past year, how many crisis call would you say on average that you've received from women?
Generally speaking, we receive 11 to 1,200 calls a year.
Wow, that is a lot of calls. My goodness, that is a lot of calls. I am so glad that really and truly that your company, your organization is there to help women because
I think, and I think what's really important about that, Marvalee, is that women need to know that there's support when they're ready to reach out.
Yes.
Women have to be ready to do that.
Yes.
As we talked a little bit earlier, it's a very, very difficult decision for them to make, irregardless of the situation that they're living in.
Right.
So when they're ready to reach out, it becomes important for services to be able to respond.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Because that's the critical time.
Exactly. Because I'm just thinking, had you not been there, that's 11, 1,200, that there would be you wouldn't be there to help them. So I'm really glad that you're there for that. Now, have you ever had to, and this really broke my heart when I was actually, putting pen to paper, just thinking about this. Have you ever had to turn women away because of lack of space? And if so, what alternative do you offer?
I'm very sad and sorry to say women are turned away nearly daily.
Wow.
Even with the bed space that we have and the bed space that the other shelters in Durham region has, there's many women are not able to get a bed when they call, unfortunately. So one of the things that becomes really important about that is that if a woman calls us and we don't have bed space, we work with the other shelters to connect with them and see if there's a way that they have space. We'll assist a woman to transport her here to Bowmanville, for example, or out to Ajax to one of the other shelters.
Yes.
And then if she chooses, once bed space frees up in Oshawa, she chooses to come back, then we'll assist with that as well. So it's really about our responsibility working with the other community services, including shelters, to do our very best to provide that safety for women.
Exactly. And, that's very important to note. Should in case there might be a woman who knows that maybe listening to this podcast and, thinking to themselves, well, what if I decide to leave today and there is no space, then what? They're not left alone. That, they are being supported along the way to try to find, assistance for them. That's very important.
And the other thing too is we receive calls from women and they're not ready to leave at that point in time. But by making that call, we're able to support them and say to them, call us however frequently you need to call us, whenever you need to call us. We also have outreach services connected to the shelter. So if a woman is not ready to leave, she's able to be connected with our outreach services that can work with her very closely, depending on how much she wants. and continue to work with her that way. So
Yes.
there's a few different ways that we can support women,
Exactly.
depending on what their needs are.
Yes. Wonderful. Good to know. Good to know. Um, Oftentimes, women are afraid of for their safety when choosing to flee domestic violence. What protocol, if any, are in place at Denise House to assure women their protection while they're there?
So we are able to provide security for women while they're in the shelter. So we have certain policies and practices around
Yes.
what doors remain on alarm, if you will.
Right.
There's only one entrance in and out of the shelter.
Mhm.
Getting into the shelter is always monitored by staff. Women are free to leave,
Right.
certainly when they need to go and go about
Yes.
their business. We also have cameras and monitoring systems
Yes.
and things like that. So we have those physical safety
Right.
mechanisms. But one of the other things that we do is we do safety planning with women. So for when they're out in the community,
Yes.
taking care of their business,
Exactly.
we've tried to ensure that they continue to have awareness of themselves and
Right.
where they are, and build a safety plan that way.
Mhm.
Because there's no absolute 100% safety,
No, there
right?
isn't. Yes.
So between the inside the shelter, between those security measures, and really focusing on safety planning with women,
Yes.
that's the best we can do.
That's wonderful. That's great to know because I remember going through and doing my research. I remember Interville House um, when they had just opened up. Because they were in their infancy and they just wanted to help women. At the time, they didn't really have any. Their safety procedure at the time was answer the door. No, she does not want to speak with you.
That's right.
And there were times when even the gentleman at the door was actually a husband, but he was a police officer. So husband who are
Yes.
police officer
Yeah.
coming for their wives, right? And then the ladies at the home would have to say, no, I'm sorry, but she does not want to speak with you right now, right? So as we can see over the years as time goes on, how the safety protocols are put in place and so on.
Right. It's interesting. Certainly, Interval House opened almost 10 years before the Denise House did. But
Yes.
I remember when I first started and thinking, I hope someone else here knows what they're doing because I'm not sure that I do.
Yes.
As much as I hate to admit that,
Yeah.
but I think we have to remember too that those services were just starting, even though the first
Yes.
one started 10 years prior to
Yes.
the Denise House, but it was still very new. That there was not a lot of support in the communities
Right.
for those services opening up, right?
Yes. Yes.
And we had to learn
Mhm.
as women came to us. We had to
Yes.
learn what then we needed to do to help
Exactly.
protect them
Right.
and provide that safety and security. So we've had a long learning curve
Yes.
over 40 some odd years. So
Right. Yes.
but then again, that's what really needed to happen.
Mhm.
We need to be responding to women's circumstances,
Exactly.
not assuming we know
Yes.
best, right?
Exactly. Listen to them. Hear their voices.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
All right. Okay. So now tell me, there are times when women they are afraid to leave their abusive relationship if they have children.
Mhm.
Because they are afraid that child and family services may take their children away from them. Can you speak to that? Because that is a real fear.
And thank you for raising that because
Yes.
I agree with you. I think there's a misunderstanding
Yes.
of what child protection, child and family services intention is.
Yes.
And their intention is not to take children away.
Yes.
Their intention is to work with families around struggles,
Yes.
but they have a primary focus for child protection,
Yes.
right? In my experience, I have never seen any child protection services, Durham Children's Aid Society,
Right.
Remove children because a woman left the house.
Right.
If there's child protection concerns, they will get involved if
Yes.
need be. That's their mandate. but their focus is to support
Yes.
the family. Their focus is to support mom,
Yes.
not to remove children from families.
Yes, and I would really echo that because that is true. Even speaking from personal experiences, they are really there to help. They actually they will call and they would listen to the woman's what she has to say and her concerns and so forth. They're not there to bully, and they're certainly not there for their intent to take the children away from the parents. That's not what they're there for. So for anyone who might be fearing, they have children and so forth, if I go this road, will I then lose my children? I want them to be able to put that fear to rest.
Right. We frequently work with children's aid protection workers.
Yes.
We often sit in the interviews with the permission of moms.
Yes.
The workers, they're fine with that.
Yes.
It's about what do we all need to do collectively as support services to support this mom, support those children.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And support the family in whatever way is best for the children.
Yes. Exactly.
So we frequently work with Children's Aid Society workers.
Yes. And I'm so glad that that you do, because that is very important. I would say that's really up there on the top of the list for moms, right? Fleeing violence. Now, is there a maximum age for children who are fleeing domestic violence with their mothers that Denise House will take?
At the Denise House, if a mom is coming, whomever she describes as a dependent child, doesn't matter what the age is, as long as mom, in her view, wishes to bring that child, male or female, of any age, she or he is welcome.
Oh, that's wonderful. That is so good to know. Male or female of any age is very good to know, because children are, when a mom is in that position, her children are, her anchor, right? She holds on to her children and so forth. And she would rather stay in the hurt than to know that she may, it's possible that she has to leave a child behind.
Now, having said that, that's how we operate.
Yes.
I will be honest and say there are some shelters that have a different practice.
Right.
For whatever reason that they have established. But for us, it's important that mom be able to bring whomever she feels she needs to bring, irregardless of age. I think the challenge, for example, we've had young adult guys, 18, 19 years old. So it becomes a challenge for us to make him comfortable.
You're right.
Right?
Yes.
But we try our best.
Yes, I could only imagine.
Yeah. So we have to make sure that we're trying to make the kids comfortable.
Yes, to cater to both mom and children.
Exactly.
All right. Over the years, have there ever been any threat to Denise House directly because of the work that you do for women and children?
Not at the Denise House, not directly to us.
Okay.
To some of our clients, yes, but not directly to the Denise House.
Okay, good to know. What can a woman expect upon arrival at Denise House?
I think just to be met with the staff and certainly to be welcomed. I think just take a read of how the woman is feeling. First and foremost, we like to get her settled in a room if we can get that done. But first and foremost, too, we just need to kind of get a sense of, is she tired? Is she hungry? Do we really need to start paperwork now? So again, it's about trying to take the cue from the woman herself.
Right.
What is she able to do in that moment of arriving? And we just need to work with that. The hours and the days will come where we will do the necessary paperwork. We will figure out what her goals are. But in those first 24 to 48 hours, it's just important to let women relax. Let women experience, hopefully, that sense of safety.
Yes, exactly. And just cater to their emotional well-being.
Exactly.
Okay, very good. Does Denise House accept women fleeing domestic violence at any hour of the day or night?
Yeah, yes, we're
Okay.
they're staffed 24/7.
Okay, wonderful. Good to know. Good to know for our audience. Now, the violence that some of these women face at the hands of their intimate partner is deeper than the average mind can imagine. I personally know of women who were brutally raped at the hands of their husbands over and over again, even in front of their small children,
Yes.
even with objects as well.
Mhm.
What would you say to those? Because I know that there are many. So, what would you say to those who would say what a man does with his wife should not be called rape?
What I would say is what a man does to his wife or partner should always be respectful
Mhm.
and again with the mindset of she's equal.
Yes.
So I would say to someone that to exert power and control
Yes.
over another individual, particularly one that you profess to love and
Right.
wish to live with, no, that's not love, and
Yes.
you're not entitled to that.
Exactly. It's not acceptable.
No, it's not.
It's a harm that you're inflicting on the person that you claim you love. That's never acceptable.
Well, I think that the underlying thing around violence and abuse is it is about power and control.
Yes,
Right.
yes, that's true. That's very true. Very true. In the past 5 years, has the number of women seeking shelter from domestic violence increased or decreased, would you say?
And that's a question I think
Mhm.
has been asked over and over again, and it's difficult to answer because for me personally, this is just my opinion.
Right.
Okay. I think there are a lot of women out there experiencing varying levels of violence and abuse in their lives.
Mhm.
Many women reach out, but many women do not.
Yes.
And I think that answer to that question
Yes.
wholly depends on women finding that courage to reach out
Yes.
and a support service being there to respond.
Exactly.
And hopefully there are communities where that can happen for women.
Yes.
I believe that
Mhm.
there are far more women not reaching out than
Yes.
do.
Yes.
So I don't believe that there's a decrease
Exactly.
in what women are experiencing.
Exactly. And I would definitely agree with you on that. There are women out there because the fear is great.
Sure it is.
And sometimes the fear overtakes the urge to leave, right?
Yes.
So I do believe that there are a lot of women out there that are going through domestic violence and choose to stay, right? Not because they want to, but they choose to stay because of fear. And
Absolutely.
fear is huge.
Well, there's that saying, it's easier to deal with the fear that you know and understand than the fear that you don't know.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
So if that makes sense, right?
Yes,
So
yes.
so the fear of leaving and not knowing what she's going to meet and how she's going to navigate some of those systems and challenges,
Exactly.
that's can be just as terrifying.
Yes, exactly. And that's why I'm so glad that we have platforms such as this that brings awareness so that women can get some of those questions answered.
Sure.
And know that there are services out there designed to help them. All right. How long can a woman stay with her children at the Denise House Shelter?
It really just depends on where does she wishes to go from the shelter.
Right.
And then in more recent years, again, we're back to what challenges are presented just within the community around financial capacity, housing, affordable, safe housing.
Exactly.
Women on Ontario Works Social Assistance cannot afford to pay $2,500 to $2,800 a month in rent.
No.
It's just that simple.
Exactly.
So, but even a 2-bedroom apartment for a mom and one child, in what some may term as a less desirable area and or building, is still $1,600, $1,700, $1,800 a month. So social assistance does not allow for that.
Mm-hmm.
So the challenges are great. So
Right.
just to circle back to your question around length of stay,
Right.
it just really depends on what her goal is.
Yes.
And unfortunately, leaving the shelter, many women might have several more moves before they land into their permanent living environment, right?
It's true.
So 2 months, 3 months, we've had women 6 months.
Okay.
There are other factors too. We're seeing more and more women that have immigration, unfinished immigration business that takes significant amount of time to sort through, right? So it really depends on a woman's situation. There's no standard. You can only be here for 8 weeks and then you must leave.
Okay, that's good. So they don't feel forced out, which is
no, but there's things that women need to continue to try to do to move forward, right?
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And they get help for that. So very, very glad for that. How could you tell us a little bit about the community outreach program? I know you touched on it before, but I'm thinking about counseling. Some of these women, they're coming in with, oh my God, so much stress and so many things that they have gone through and so forth. And just to be able to have a counselor talk to them and so forth. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. So our community outreach staff work with certainly women once they leave the shelter, and they would find continual connection to us helpful. So our outreach workers will maintain that connection. Then there are women, for various reasons that they've determined, they don't need the shelter service, but they need that support and that connection with staff. And they may be going through some of the legal issues. They may be going through some challenges around children's behavior, whatever the situations are for women. So those are a lot of the pieces of work that our outreach workers do. There's also group work for women that feel that that's something that they would like to do. There's a number of groups that run. There's a number of groups that run for children as well. If it's counseling of the sort that requires trauma-based counseling because of historical issues, then we would make a referral to a counseling service that does that work. Okay. So that often happens, but the type of supportive counseling that we do can also be done in conjunction with this. So again, the outreach takes its lead from what the women need, and hopefully we can provide.
Yes, wonderful, wonderful. Now, does the Denise House Shelter for Women receive its funding from various sources? And if so, who might those sources be?
So our shelter, along with many, many shelters in Ontario, were funded by the Ministry of Community and Children's Social Services. So that's the provincial ministry. So we're what's called a transfer payment agency, not to confuse everyone here, but so we have yearly agreements for funding levels, right? So that's where the majority of our money comes from, our operating budget comes from. We have other pots of money, certainly from the region of Durham, to do specific housing work. And then, quite honestly, the goodwill of the community. We've never not had to fundraise and ask the community for support. And unfortunately, I don't know another shelter in Ontario that's never had to fundraise either. So, but generally speaking, the provincial funding takes care of 75 to 80% of the funding that we need.
All right. Yes. Last year alone, Denise House provided over 40,000, that is a lot, meals and snacks. Was this done by the help of volunteers and staff? Or?
Well, so when we tried to do the math around this, we've got 27, 30 people times 3 meals a day, snacks, school lunches, all of those things. So we just try to demonstrate that when there's that number of women and children in the shelter, these are some of the challenges that I take for granted. Maybe I don't eat 3 meals a day, maybe I only eat 2, whatever. We have that choice. They don't, right? so women in our shelter, anyways, we're very fortunate. We have a woman who will prepare 4 meals for dinner every week. She also takes care of the food ordering and many other things. And then women also can cook for themselves and their families as well. So it's a well-oiled machine to get everyone fed. I have to tell you, and to get the groceries and all of the required food into the shelter to have it there for everyone. And then the business of school lunches and school snacks is
all of that as well.
Yes.
It's a lot. It takes a lot to feed so many people. My goodness.
Yes.
Now, can you please share with our viewers your 24-hour crisis line number, both local and toll-free number, and your email information website should anyone need to take advantage of your service? Let's share with our...
Okay. So yes, anyone that needs our service or would like to inquire about a service, one of the easiest ways to reach us would be just to key in the Denise House on the internet, use any browser. We will automatically pop up, but we're also www.thedenisehouse.com. There's lots of information on our website, and right at the very top of the page, you will find both an email address, info@thedenisehouse.com. And you will also find numbers to call. You don't have to go searching through pages. It's all right there for you to do. The other thing, if you're really concerned, police departments, certainly within Durham region, they know how to reach us. So I would say to you, if it's an emergency, the first call should be to 911. That's most important. And the police, again, we work very closely with them. We can work certainly with them. So that becomes really, really important. Those numbers are there. Put them into your phone. The other thing I would say to you is we show up as a no contact number on your phone, so there's no need for worrying about tracking. But important for you to know that the information is there and to reach out if you need us.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Sandra, for that. And I just want to say a little, before we conclude, I just want to say a little prayer for the ladies out there. Father God, I thank you for this day. I thank you for bringing Sandra McCormack here to shed some light on what is being offered at the Denise House and many shelters roundabout here in Ontario. I thank you for the work that she's doing and for all the staff, what they're doing for these women who needs help out there. And I pray, oh God, that you will help these women find shelters such as the Denise House, where they can feel safe and welcome and loved and taken care of. And Father, not only just for their temporal needs, but also, Lord God, for their spiritual needs. And Lord God, you're the ultimate provider for everything, for body, soul, and mind. You are the ultimate provider. So I pray, oh God, that as you are taking care of their physical need, Father God, to remember as well their spiritual needs. My God, I thank you again for Sandra and for all the staff down at the Denise House. May you continue to bless them and to increase them and provide for their needs as well, that they can continue to provide for these women. We say thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. Sandra, just one last thing I would just want to ask if you could let our viewers know, should someone wish to donate to Denise House, how would they go about doing that as well? What kind of donation are you in need of? If you could just let them know.
So we welcome any donation that a community member would like to take. So again, the website is there. There's an info@thedenisehouse.com email that you can reach out to connect with. We're happy to speak with anyone around what it is you wish to do. If it's a monetary donation, there's a donate button at the top of the website that you can use to make a monetary donation. And then either an email or call us, and we're happy to talk to you about what it is you would like to do and how it is you would like us to use your donation as well. So I encourage you to do that.
Thank you so much, Sandra. Help me welcome. Thanks, Sandra, for being here with us today. It was a privilege and a pleasure to have you here on the Truth podcast with Marvalee. I am so glad that you were able to shed some light on this very important topic, and that our viewers who may not have been fully educated in that area now have a broader understanding of what it is that you do and the work that you provide for them, should they ever in need of your service, or even know someone who might be in the need for the services that you provide. Thank you so very much, Sandra, for being with us here today.
You're very welcome. I thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Oh, you're most welcome. We are God's broadcasting station. And until next time, this is Truth with Marvalee Podcast saying, give God the glory.